I got the walk, there's a longboard walk. I know the talk, the longboard talk. I know the talk.
And it looks like we're live. So, exciting day for us again today. Welcome along to episode 9 of Oz Longboarding. I'm Weeksy in WA and joined this week by a panel of expert longboarders from around the country. We'll say a quick hello and then introduce you to our guests. We can start off by telling you that Andy Mack won't be joining us this evening. He's had a little bit of a heart attack related issue today, but he's up and about and talking on the phone and things. So he's announced it on Facebook and stuff that he's okay. But Andy, our thoughts with you, mate. Look after yourself. Get yourself ready and back on deck so we can get you on the show. And thank you publicly for all the amazing stuff you do for our sport. In the meantime, let's chuck a lap around the country. We'll do it clockwise this week. Kira Molnar on the Sunshine Coast. How are you, mate? How was your week?
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty busy week, and we've had that swell pick up just recently, except for the fact that the points are flat and the swell's really southerly and the opens are pumping in a bit straight, so it's not the best swell we've ever had. I'm know that it's not perfect here every single day, Weeksy. But yeah, it's been a good week.
Yeah, look, I know I'll give you a bit of grief about that. You had a good run, but judging by a couple of photos I saw from Peregian yesterday, you're still not missing out that much if you take a bit of a drive, huh? Was that
Very true.
Josh Constable getting himself a few more great photos? Moving down around the coast, down towards the Gold Coast, and Big Sean on the borderline between Queensland and New South Wales, putting up with border life. How's things there, mate?
Yeah, pretty good. Had a couple of fresh mornings the last couple, but they've been beautiful days. This morning the swell was getting in on the southern points, but around the 5 foot mark, but it wasn't all time. Across the border and down the Tweed coast, it's been far bigger, clean as. There's been some absolute fantastic barrels going down. So a lot of stuff on YouTube and that to have a look at.
Nice. And you've spoken to Andy Mack today, mate?
I did have a quick chat with Andy. He was up and talking. He's actually put a post on his Facebook page telling you that, the doctor saved his life. So he's feeling okay, but he just wasn't up to doing the show tonight. So looks like Phil's going to cop it all. But, our thoughts and prayers are out there with Andy and Megan and that. So hopefully he doesn't have to join the Zipper Club. They can look after him properly.
Yeah, he's a tireless worker, and hopefully this motivates him to have a little bit of a break. Slightly further down the coast, and he's only here for half the show, so we'll get as much airtime for him as we can. Jack Entwistle, how's your week, big fella?
Mate, yeah, pretty good. G'day, everyone. The waves were pretty small, obviously, at the start of the week, and yesterday and today. It's all right. It's a pretty big, solid south swell, so the points aren't really doing it. When I say points, I mean the pass. But as Maddie and we were talking about this just before, Lennox is pretty pumping, and so is obviously the Goldie and the rest of the East Coast. Not an amazing swell. It's just a little bit too big and a little bit straight. But I think in the next few days, once this swell kind of backs off and the swell goes a bit more east, it should be pretty much fun up and down the whole coast.
Unreal, and good that you're getting some work, everything at work, and getting up and running again there on the coast as well. So we'll do some more COVID updates, but before we get deep into COVID territory, Nate's smiling over there in the background. In Sydney, Matt Chinoski, has your run of sick waves continued, has it?
Yeah, it's been one of the best winters I can remember. Started off a little slow, as I keep saying, but this last 3 days, the reefs have just lit up. And yesterday, I'm going to say, look, Wednesday, I gave it a miss. I thought, you know what? The next day is going to be bigger and cleaner. And it was. And I'm going to go as far to say it was some of the biggest and cleanest reef break barrels that we've had in Sydney in decades. 4 times overhead, proper 15 foot plus. It was a sight to be seen. And the best thing to take out of that is there's a new generation that are starting to surf these waves and paddle. And they're all in their teens and early 20s. And I was one of the oldest ones out there at 31. And it was ridiculous. It's 16-year-old kids with no sponsors or anything putting themselves over the ledges, and really a good mateship out there and a good sort of brotherhood. And it's really cool to see because Sydney doesn't get that big that often, and the guys don't get that much practice. But the best thing is they went and paddled the bombies as well, which was really cool. It's something that was, around in the 60s and 70s, groups of, groms and surfers traveling together, surfing these waves and pushing each other, which is great. But yeah, I chased the swell up the coast. It's a little bit smaller up here, but really well groomed, and surfed with Jack this afternoon at a famous right-hand point, and slightly wrong swell direction, but that's why they're world-class waves, because they handle, different swell directions. And pleasure to be surfing on the East Coast, and stoked to be on the podcast.
Awesome. Well, I am starting to get jealous again. You guys got to settle down with all your good surfing stories. Nath Riverland, how's things for you this week, mate? I know the pool was open and now it's closed again. Talk us through that as well, if you can.
Yeah, hey guys. So the pool closed again. Would have been probably early last week. We had another kind of influx of positive tests for COVID. So the pool's closed up. Ocean-wise, we've had pretty crappy waves the last week. It's been devil wind southeast pretty much all week. But it's turned northwest this arvo, and tomorrow and Saturday are looking okay. So fingers crossed we'll get some waves.
All right. And so, again, you look like you've had a chance to recover a little bit from your surf trip, which took it out of you, apparently. And now it's time to welcome our special guest for the week. There was going to be two, but now it's one. And I'll tell you what, we could probably fill 3 or 4 one-hour shows with our guests this week, all the way up at Agnes Water, enjoying some time away from the usual grind. Welcome to the show, Mr. Phil Jarratt.
Thanks, Wixie. Pleasure to be here on your podcast.
Notice I didn't make the mistake of trying to go into a bio for you. We'll work our way through a few stories, but I've made that mistake before and ended up having 6 pages of A4 in front of me while I introduced you, and Pete Townend, I think it was, at Kingscliff one year. But, mate, suffice it to say you've been involved in surfing for quite some time. You've been editor of magazines, you've written stories and still continue to write. Well, you wrote Kelly Slater's biography, for crying out loud. So you've been in and around the sport forever and a day, and you're continuing on now. And tonight you're here to talk about World Surfing Reserves. So how did you go from just being a guy that would go surfing to being so passionate that you're now president of such an important movement?
Just unlucky, I guess. I mean, I wish Andy was here to support me, but can I just say off the top of the program, John was up and doing something interesting there. I think he was having a leak against the wall. I don't know whether that's allowed where he is. I just wanted to say off the top that Andy and Megan, our hearts are with you. Been there, done that. I sent you a note to that effect this afternoon. But look after yourself, brother. You do far too much work for surfing. Most of it's for surfing. Some of it for other passions of yours, but most of it is for surfing, and you really tax yourself to the max. And it's time to just slow down a bit. And so I wish you all the best. I wish you could be here with me tonight, but I'll cover it. Don't worry, and get well. Love you.
It's funny you should say you can see it from his perspective, because we were just discussing before we came on air. It's becoming a bit of a current theme with our guests, with JB and Andy and now yourself. You've survived your own complications in that regard.
Well, I think you can just call it a heart attack, Wixie.
All right, I don't know. Everyone's so PC these days. I don't know. You had a heart attack at Belfield.
We don't have to blush about it. I mean, so many male surfers who surf through their lives and don't quit when people used to quit at 30. When I was starting out in surfing, it was fairly commonplace for people to go, well, hey, I got a mortgage, I got a wife, I got kids, I've got to just knuckle down and work and pay the bills. I haven't got time to go surfing. It was always kind of an easy way out in those days. But there's a hardcore of people who are committed and passionate enough about surfing. We just went, well, bullshit to that. We're going to surf through our lives. And I'm fortunate to be alive with a whole bunch of guys in their 60s and 70s, and a couple even in their 80s and approaching their 80s, like my good mate Doug Warbrick, and others, and still loving surfing, doing it to the best of their abilities, and just enjoying that passion that's a lifelong passion. So with that comes the increased danger that something's going to go wrong somewhere. And someone, Kiwi White, someone who just passed a couple of weeks ago, was had his own health issues, but he was passionate about installing defib stations at remote surfing locations, like his own remote surfing location, which is Cactus. And he did it. He paid for it out of his own pocket. And he was a guy who wasn't a rich man, but he paid for it, and then eventually he was reimbursed by various charities and that saw the good that he was doing. But that's a place. Cactus is a place like Margaret River, like Noosa, like Byron Bay, like so many, like Torquay, like so many places around Australia, that where old people, old surfers gravitate to in their later years and maybe in their retirement years, and they want to keep surfing. And we have to be careful about the facilities that we provide for those people. We have to make sure that they're taken care of, that there is the possibility of sustaining life after a heart attack in a place like Cactus. Because before there was the possibility of an air ambulance or a defib, if you died in a remote, if you had a heart attack in a remote location like that, you were dead. And so we have to, and Bali, and all of the Indonesian archipelago for that matter, is another place where older guys and girls too, but mostly guys, head out on remote surf trips and really put their lives on the line, because there's no possibility of getting you somewhere safe in the allotted time if you've had a major heart attack. And something we all have to think about as we get older. And I just had a correspondence this afternoon with a buddy of mine for many years now, and somebody that's very close with Andy Mack, and I'm sure will be shattered by today's news. Felipe Pomar, the 1965 world champion, who is behind the whole deal of Surf Till You're 100. And my good mate Jeff Hackman, who I've written a book with and been friends with for many years, is also part of that posse. It seems remarkable that you could even contemplate that, but it also, when I was starting out in surfing, it seemed remarkable to think that you could surf beyond 50. So why not surf till you're 100? And Felipe is trying to show us the pathway there. I don't know whether I'm going to get there, Weeksy, but I'm going to try.
Mate, I sometimes feel like I'm not going to be able to surf past next week, but I was thinking recently, like a lot of sports you play when you're a kid at school or whatever. If you're interested in it, you might play on your weekends and things. You might become a state representative or whatever. And at some point you go, right, now I'm past it. I'm now a spectator. I'm not a participator anymore. It seems longboarding doesn't have that off switch. There is.
Well, I mean, and that is the beauty of longboarding. And especially for those of us who started with longboards when there was no distinction, because there was no shortboard, it was just surfing. So for those of us, there were many of us who grew up in the 60s until McTavish changed the world in 1967, early 68, and everything started to move very quickly. But for those first few years, for me, I was born in 1951, so by the time I was 16, 17, everything was changing. But those first 4 or 5 years of my surfing career, we started later in those days because the boards were so heavy. I think that was the main reason. And also, who could afford a surfboard? It cost, like £2 or something. It weighed about 100 pounds, but it only cost £2. Anyway, we started on longboards, and when ultimately we went back to longboards with the renaissance in the longboard culture, I guess from about the mid 80s onwards in Australia, and gathering strength through the 90s and now into the new century. It was kind of a welcome relief that we didn't have to pretend that we could ride the shortboards anymore. We could, or mid-range or whatever. We could actually feel quite comfortable going back to where we began. And I know I've, in the last 20, 30 years of my surfing life, I've been more than happy to consider myself a longboarder. I have jumped on the odd mid-range or shortboard, on island trips. But essentially, I've been a longboarder for so long that it is what I am, and I don't resile from that. And I think most of us who are still surfing into our golden years feel the same way, that you can just go on longer. The more volume, the longer you got.
So what sort of board do you find yourself? What's the most common? Describe your most common board that comes off the roof and hits the water these days.
I've got a really thick volume Rooster, Legend Island surfboards, I think he calls them. Darryl Dell Rooster. It's been a mate of mine for 100 years, and is a great Queensland shaper. He's been with all the brand. He was with Cord back in the early days, and Matty Chinosky can tell you all about that. But Rooster is a hell of a shaper, so I've always got a Rooster in my kit, and that's my heavy volume board. And my thinner slicey thing for when it gets 4 foot plus is a Josh Constable Creative Army jive model. It's a bit beaten up, but I love it to death. And I'm really happy. I brought it with me up here to Agnes, which was a mistake because I should have brought a 12-footer.
Always.
I also brought my fishing rod, so all's good.
Hey Phil, you talked about I guess the aging population of surfers and some of those remote locations having access to health and I guess general safety supplies. Just surfing one of the famous right-hand points here on the North Coast this afternoon, the best surfers in the water were the ones that I enjoyed watching, and the ones that didn't fall off were guys of your vintage. They had great wave selection, and the key factor is they weren't on the longboards, but they had volume in their surfboards, and you could tell they come from a bygone era where they understand momentum and trim, and they utilize those facets on the wave, and it's beautiful to watch. And it's something that those point breaks that we spoke about, even places like Kira and Noosa, even places like North Narrabeen, where you still have guys like Rabbit out there. At Narrabeen, you got Simon Nanas, who fits. They are still iconic, and it is important that we keep. I guess this is I've never even thought about this, but it's important that we keep, at these known locations, our older generation safe, and the younger generation too, So it's something that you've inspired me already just in the beginning of this podcast to think about and maybe see where I can get behind, because I think it's really special what you mentioned there.
Well, thanks, Matty. But I think it's just really important that we look after the older generation of surfers in that respect, because you don't want your heritage to literally die out in the water, and so many people are, and particularly in Indo, like every winter season, so many people are just dying in not even very remote locations. I mean, I nearly died on a biggish day in Canggu. Where help was all around, but not when I needed it.
JB at Sunset.
Yeah, exactly. And JB's episode, which he dramatically recounted on this podcast a few weeks back. Well, his was a lot harder than mine. Mine and hopefully Andy's was relatively mild. I got out of it with a stent. And I haven't looked back. It took me a while to recover, but I haven't looked back, and I've been able to surf and enjoy life in the 6 years since it happened. But at the time, it was pretty scary episode. And to me, it highlighted the fact that as we get older, we really have to take this on board. That you got to be careful. You got to be careful about your buddies when you surf with them. And it's one of the reasons that part of, I know we're going to talk about the World Surfing Reserve movement a bit later, but one of the reasons that we've included in our stewardship program is duty of care for surfers of all ages. And in small ways, like Kiwi White paying for defib stations at Cactus, we want to put defib stations throughout the national park in Noosa. Also, we've started a CPR system based on the Surfing New South Wales was the first one that actually instigated this, and I believe Surfing Victoria has since picked up on it. But it's a CPR. It's advocating CPR lessons for everybody, whether they're in a club or whether they're surfing competitively, or whether they're just surfing for their own benefit. Doesn't matter. If you're out there with your mates, you need to know how to save them in an emergency. And emergencies happen more and more as we surf older and older.
And I guess that's why I think Kira Molnar is going to be a millionaire, because she's going to put together a preventative maintenance package for old boys. Because I would assume that recovery comes with a change of diet and perhaps lifestyle.
Yeah, well, that's yeah. I'm not going to dispute that, but I've actually I put a little bit.
Picture of hell.
Thins your blood.
I put a bit of soda water. I put a bit of soda water in my wine, and I feel that's doing me a hell of a lot of good. And there are other ways, of course, but that's a very important one for me. My diet's always been relatively good. I'm not a junk food kind of guy. I've always eaten quite well. My wife's a good cook, and we eat proper food. No, look for me. I don't want to talk about my heart attack deal, but for me, I had two things against me. My dad died relatively early from a heart attack, so I had a hereditary issue, and also I had many stress jobs. In fact, I feel like I've still got a stress job going on right now, but it's the combination of hereditary disposition towards heart disease and stress in your life is not a good combo. And I had both of those things going on, but I was pretty much in denial. And since I had that episode 6 years ago, I've tried to lessen stress. I've tried to enjoy my life more, and I'm certainly doing that. And part of that is the whole surfing thing. So I think you just got to get everything in balance.
Fair enough. I want to hear from Jack Entwistle before we lose him, because he has to disappear halfway through the show. Jack, I can see you're too polite to jump in, mate.
No, that's good. It's nice to listen to Phil, and I think I couldn't agree more. I think that, especially in a place like Noosa, when you walk out to Tea Tree every second day, that having a little station halfway out, or even at Tea Tree, a defib station is just perfect, because God knows how many people, every year could potentially have a heart attack. And that's not even to say it's an old boy. It could be someone, middle-aged that has, random health problems. So, I think that's a great point, and definitely something that I think will slowly happen over the next couple of years, hopefully. Yeah.
I felt like I've needed one just from walking out the point without even catching a wave or swallowing a stingray or a jellyfish or whatever. But look, certainly I've only just recently done my first aid course again, and the whole defib thing. All the locations are on the first aid, the St John Ambulance app on your phone, and I think as time goes on, anyone with common sense would support an expansion of that program.
Yeah.
But sorry, who was? I saw someone piping up there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it was while we're on the subject of health and Andy, I was actually watching an Australian surf movie from 1972, In Natural Flow. It's kind of snippets of what's that?
Steve Core.
Steve Core, yeah. So all early 70s Aussie footage specifically, all around contests, I'm guessing, but it was Kira, Lennox, Bells, and surrounding locations, a little bit of sand shoes here and maybe a little bit of narrowband. And you wouldn't believe it. I have my friend Tom Payne that I'm traveling up. He's a goofy footer, and I was trying to show him, some early 70s surfing on their backside and how hard those guys had it and how impressive it is when you think of the guys going vertical on those boards. And what do you know? Andy popped up on the screen in the clip at Bells, and he hammered the end section. Like it was, and he was going, pretty vertical, and it sort of moving around. I thought, how fitting is that? That's so cool. And it was just a weird coincidence. I was just watching that yesterday and showing a young up and coming goofy footer, something of the past, and just still relevant today.
Can I just add something there, Matty?
Yeah.
Just on Andy Mack. I've known him for 45 years or more, and the guy was an awesome surfer. He still is he's still an ornament to surfing, but for people who have known him in more recent years and maybe haven't seen him surfing at his peak, although he still gives it a whack on a longboard. I've seen that at the Noosa Surfing Festival several times. But back in the 70s, like Andy went to the world titles in 72 in San Diego, and he was a goofy footer par excellence. And his backhand attack in Bells and also in southeast Queensland and in so many other right-hand point breaks around the place was just incredible to watch. Hats off to that guy in so many ways, not only for his contributions to surfing, but to surfing as an administrator and as an advocate, but as a surfer himself. We don't want to forget that Andy was an incredible surfer, and he was a world champion in longboarding, but he could also have been a world champion in shortboarding.
It's funny as well, and he doesn't blow his own trumpet. I knew Andy for a while as like the commentator guy. Being a commentator, I'd come to the East Coast and I'd do a bit of commentating with Andy, and had a bit of a laugh. And a couple of times I thought he was trying to steal my job off me, didn't I, Sean? And it wasn't until afterwards, I didn't realise he had 30 years or 34 years, whatever, doing the surf report and stuff. It's like so embedded in the culture on the East Coast or the Gold Coast. As well as actually having been a world champion. I only found that out about after knowing him for 5 years. Most people, that's sort of something they'd let you, they'd drop in the conversation after speaking a couple of times. So it's, how hard is it, Phil, but behind the scenes? I mean, I know I do get to see more than most, but after all these years of running the Noosa Festival, now that you've sort of stepped away from that, do you find yourself sort of, I don't know, hoping for a glitch in the system so that someone else will appreciate it? It's like it never goes smooth. So do you kind of wait for that to happen to someone else to they can appreciate what the tribulations you've been through all these years?
No, my heart bleeds for the organisers and everybody involved, and from John Finlay down, for what's happened at the festival the last couple of years in terms of wave quality, because we never had 2 years in a row as bad as we've had in 2019, 2020. It was pretty awful, to be honest. And when you're just starting out, when you've taken over the event and everything, you really don't need that. You can have 1 year and you can go, okay, well, everybody will still come back because they know that that's not going to happen next year. And then it happens next year and people are going, oh, I don't think we're going to, will we fly out from California for that? Sometimes this doesn't work. Doesn't work, not worth the money, etc. And as it turns out, COVID has made that a non-event idea anyway, because they can't come. So it's sad times for all surfing events all over the world, but for the Noosa Festival, which was just reinventing itself under a new regime, and I was a little bit of a part of that on the sidelines. I hadn't left it entirely, and I'm very disappointed that that's the way it's gone. And I hope it can survive and thrive in the years to come.
Would this year have been the first time that not one single heat, apart from the dog surfing on the last day, ran at the point?
No. The last time was 1999, so it was a 20-year gap. But in 1999, when we had more money than we'd ever had before, courtesy of Breaker flavoured milk, they chucked big bucks at it. And we had the World Tandem Championships won by Chris Theobotis, my buddy, who I'm having a few beers with this week here in Agnes Water. He won the world title for the tandem event, which was sponsored entirely by Breaker. They had the naming rights over the whole deal, and their contribution was really substantial. And it enabled us to bring all these incredible legends of surfing from a lot of them from Hawaii, a lot of them from California, but also from Europe. People coming from all over, Tahiti, wherever. It was amazing. That year was insane, and we never got to surf the point. So that was also the year of the 64 world title rematch. 35 years later, we did the first rematch that had been done, putting the original surfers in the 1964 world title final. up against each other, with the exception of Bobby Brown, who's no longer with us, but the 5 others all competed, and midget, by common consent, midget won again. But it wasn't held on the points as we wanted it to be held. It was held instead at Castaways, down the coast a little bit. Fortunately, even though it was onshore, it was quite a contestable break. The bank was behaving itself, and everything went okay, and the pictures were taken. But it was to my eternal disappointment that we couldn't showcase those wonderful surfers of that bygone era, and especially now that midget's long gone. But it would have been so wonderful to see them do their thing at First Point Noosa, and that wasn't to be. But you get that in surfing. You do everything right, and then the swell doesn't materialise. So you have to make the best of what you got. And my old buddy Sean knows all about that, don't you, Sean?
Mate, I tell you what, all you got to do is organise the sunshine and surf, and you're a genius. Everybody loves you. Doesn't matter how much else you get wrong. If you organise the best contest in the world and there's no surf and no sunshine, you're just the biggest prick in the world.
Yeah.
You can't win.
Well, Sean, you did happen to choose a break that's well known for its conveyor belt current that drags everyone off the peak as well. That can't help.
Yeah, but hey, we had to move from where we were because of duty of care. It's just too dangerous to continue surfing Snapper Rainbow with having to share the waves with free surfers.
I know when I've been just going for a surf at Kingscliff, you can paddle out alongside the groin and then just catch waves all the way down to the bolo. It's no dramas at all, but when you're in a heat going, it can get out of control. But Phil, obviously you still compete. I've seen you in heats, and you tend to, I don't know, you pretend you're lackadaisical, but then you seem a little bit serious with your body language once you're in the heat. Was competitive surfer ever a tag you put on yourself, or you just happen to be there by association?
I surfed competitively until I got comprehensively smashed by everybody in the New South Wales schoolboys in 1968, and of the better known surfers who smashed my ass was Mark Warren and Mark Richards. But there were a whole lot of others, like Eddie Cochran, I think Cochran was his name, from Cronulla, Eddie Cochran. Whole bunch of guys you wouldn't even know today who were really good at that time. Anyway, they kicked my butt. And I realised that if I wanted to continue my life in and around surfing, I had to think of another way other than trying to be competitive, and there was no such thing as pro surfing in those days. Of course, it was just a matter of, being a top surfer. And I didn't make the cut, to be honest. So I faded out, and I became a journalist and ultimately editor of surf mags and all the rest of it. But I still had that competitive instinct, and it didn't really materialise until about the mid-1990s, when it was the longboard deal, and I just entered a couple of things, the Noosa Festival of Surfing being one of them, or as it was then, the Noosa Malibu Classic, and I really enjoyed it. I just enjoyed the camaraderie, but for sure the killer instinct was evident amongst. Maybe I didn't have it then, but it developed over those years. And the older I get, the stinkier it gets. I just want to kick their butts. I want to try and win, but in a nice way. And then competing in California in events where everybody wants to kill each other. It's not like that. I think Australian old guy longboard events we're a bit more mellow than that. But there are certain competitors, and I won't name names.
I'm sure I've seen some leg rope pulling out there.
I was going to say, Kira, I've been to a lot of comps. If you have to put money on, if someone said, "Oh, there's been an interference," put your money on it's the over 65s.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a couple of blokes, but as I said, I won't name names. Sod. It's all cool, and we're all friends on the beach, and I still love the camaraderie of surfing in contests at that level, and it's not like there's sheep stations on it. There's a little tiny trophy or something if you're lucky, and maybe just a piece of paper sometimes. I was guilty of that one year. I gave pieces of paper for 4th, 5th, and 6th instead of the whole people lined up on the stage getting a trophy, and people wanted to punch me out at the back of the pub. It was terrible. So I'd never do that again. Yeah, you're laughing. You know.
You had that happen, Sean?
Yeah, nah,
Anyway, I
you
still
gotta
love
give
to compete.
trophies.
I still love to compete in the Ultra events, and hopefully they'll resume soon. This year's a write-off, but hopefully next year we'll get back and have a few events that we can hang out together and enjoy each other's company. Are you heading off, Jack?
Yeah, I do. I actually have to.
Can I say one thing before you leave?
Yeah, definitely.
Just about your dad. I loved your old man and surfed with him, when we were both in our teens. And when I got off the train at Newquay, Cornwall,
Yeah.
in 1973, having tried to ride a push bike there from London, not realising that there were hills in the southwest of England, I had to trash my bike, which had no gears. So I trashed the bike, got on the train, and got off at the train station in Newquay, Cornwall, and walked past the surf shop. And I could hear this loud Aussie voice inside that surf shop. And I walked in, and there's your dad, a little bit older than the last time I'd seen him, but he's trying to sell somebody a dog of a surfboard. And he was going, you can surf anything. I can surf a freaking door. He said, it doesn't matter what it looks like. This is a good price. You get out there and you learn to surf, and we'll get somebody to teach you. Anyway, they bought it and walked out. And I said, Twizzle. He goes, Phil, yeah. Big hug. And then he sold me a board that was equally as bad as the one he just That was Twizzle. He was a very cool guy, and we miss him every day.
Anything. Classic. Thanks for that. That's cool. Appreciate it. Yeah, mate, I got to head off and do some work, unfortunately, but yeah, I'll look forward to tuning back in, and yeah, thanks for coming on.
All right, thanks, buddy. See you soon.
Let's surf tomorrow, Jack.
Yeah, mate, give me a call. I'll be around.
Yeah, I'm stoked. Let's go.
Yeah, let's do it. All right. Have a good night, guys.
Hey, Jack.
See ya.
Cheers.
Yeah, we should do some talking about the World Surf Reserves.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, I was going to say, even though we didn't have any heats on the points, we had all of our surfing done at the Noosa Festival. The year was part of the Noosa World Surfing Reserve. Now, Phil, I'm just going to bring up the little graphic there of the map that shows where is included. So is that coming up on your screens there now?
Yep.
Yeah. That's half of it.
So
You might want to reduce it.
oh, really? Sorry. All right. Well, how's that?
No.
No.
I think you can see it, but I think we can see each other on the side in the way. That's all.
Oh, yeah, you might. Yeah,
You can move that screen around.
You might be right, Kira.
Getting to Zoom.
Yeah, maybe just.
Sparkle.
Anyway, look, you
Well,
get the general.
basically, from Sunshine Beach all the way around to the river mouth there at the Noosa River is the World Surfing Reserve. Can you explain? Well, let's just start off by explaining what makes something a World Surfing Reserve.
Yeah, well, there's not any one sort of set of criteria that exists, but essentially, I mean, it changes. It has to change by virtue of where you are in the world, whether it's a third world country or a first world country. And the third world country is much more difficult, and really where the work has to be done. So in our case, and to a degree on the Gold Coast, and the third World Surfing Reserve in Australia, which is Manly, and the first one to be declared, Manly Freshwater. In the case of, let me start with the beginning of the Australian ones. Manly Freshwater was, I think, number 3 there are now 11. Noosa is number 10. I think there are now 11 World Surfing Reserves. And Noosa and Manly freshwater was chosen almost entirely because of its heritage value, because it was the place where the first world title. It was well, even before that, it was ostensibly the place where surfing's birthplace occurred when Duke Kahanamoku gave his famous exhibition at Freshwater Beach in January 1915, and where he surfed with the locals who were already surfing but didn't really have a grip on it at Manly in that same summer. So that was the starting point for surfboard riding to get some kind of impetus in Australia. And then as the years unfolded, Manly became very important in the history of surfing, culminating in 1964 when it hosted the first ever world surfing titles, which was an invitational and not the way we know world surfing titles today, but it was a start. And that happened at Manly, and it created a lot of ructions around the world, and it actually started, it was the impetus for starting the International Surfing Association, the ISA, which became the ISF and whatever it is today. It started the whole ball rolling. So Manly was the first one for those particular reasons, not because of the quality of the waves, although the quality of the waves, as Matty Chudovsky will tell you, is pretty good. Certainly there are great breaks within that precinct, but it was primarily because of its heritage. Later, when the Gold Coast first petitioned to become a World Surfing Reserve, it was on the basis of the quality of the four major surf breaks, major right-hand point breaks in its jurisdiction. But also it was because it really needed protection from, shall I say, a renegade mayor who wanted to develop at all costs and didn't give a shit about the surf culture, really. Didn't understand how vital, how imperative it was to the whole economic structure of the Gold Coast. He's still there, and he's acquiesced somewhat, but the fight is still on. But the Gold Coast was the perfect storm, really, because they had the perfect breaks, like the best right-hand barrels in the world on their given day, and they had the best surfers in the world, many of them, and they had all these problems with development issues, and they were imperiled by a hostile local government who really didn't care. They wanted to just develop and make marinas and whatever, and destroy surf breaks. Then when you come to Noosa, we struggled to actually get our dedication as a World Surfing Reserve, because in the eyes of the people who run this stuff, we were perfect already. We didn't need to be fixed. And one of the entity that actually controls World Surfing Reserves is the Save the Waves Coalition, and they're about saving the waves. And in our case, we didn't have the compelling issues for saving the surf breaks that these other places had. We were pretty looked after by previous generations who had done a lot of the hard yards. There are still issues, many of them, but we're in a better place to move forward than the Gold Coast. They had
more preserve the waves or preserve the lifestyle rather than save it.
Yeah, well, just to finish the long story, we put the argument to the Save the Waves Coalition that we should be the example, if you like, of best practice. And best practice had been evident in Noosa since the 1960s, since Bob McTavish and many others, Russell Hughes and many others, actually discovered and exploited this place as a training ground to work on new surfboard designs, on those peeling long right-handers. It was since those days, coincidentally, that wasn't the reason, but there were a lot of people in Noosa who just arrived at that time and went, we can't let development overtake this pristine headland. We have to work to save it. And against lots of developmental threats, they did that. And so we put the argument to World Surfing Reserves Inc. in California and their parent organisation, Save the Waves Coalition, we put to them the argument that we should be an example to other places around the world, that it can be done. It's just all about community acting to as one, whether you're a surfer or whether you come from an environmental interest group or whatever. Work as one and make sure that the impacts that happen in other places can't happen here. And that's why we're the third Australian World Surfing Reserve, and very proud of it.
And as a longboard nirvana that Noosa is, in comparison to somewhere like Malibu, and I love Malibu, blessed it with all my heart, and I believe it hasn't changed that much over the years. It's a pretty grotty beach. It's an urban sort of feel. It's it's dirty. It's they've got crazy things going on with the creek that they've got emptying there, and that place, like First Point at the moment at Noosa, has got some issues. But the beauty of just the national park, and knowing that you guys have set up that place as a surfing reserve, for someone like me as a keen observer of surf history, and knowing the importance that it had in that mid-60s era for what we have today with longboarding, it set the platform. And you could arguably say, without that pristine environment preserved, you lose a huge part of our surfing heritage. And it's so amazing that it's there. And even the festival, your tie-in with the festival and the surfing reserve, I think it's just such an iconic location, and it should be preserved. And it just makes someone like me feel really comfortable knowing it's in safe hands in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Matty. I couldn't agree more. And what gives me so much joy and pride is that when I have a visitor here, whether it's some unknown surfer from Italy who I know, a brother or a cousin of or whatever, from our wonderful times surfing on the Italian coast many years ago, whether it's somebody like that who's just so ecstatic that you can walk outside the town, walk along that beautiful bush track and surf tea tree or granite and not be able to see a house. You are it seems like you're in a pristine environment. You're actually about 2 kilometers away from a really cool urbane village that's got everything you want. It's got great restaurants, etc. But it just seems
everything except parking.
Yeah, well, actually, that's another issue, and this is one of the things that we're trying to address with our stewardship program. You had your COVID test, by the way. I see you coughing in your hand there.
No, it's a wet cough. It's not a dry one.
The one bagging me, Weeksy. Just
No,
you. Maybe it's you.
Weeksy, I don't think you're going to be able to surf the wave pool with Nathan. You're just going to have to surf the natural wave pool at Noosa.
Mate, I'm actually excited about going down south tomorrow. There's big waves down around Margaret River. But anyway, back to Noosa Surf Reserve. Oh, sorry. What's the difference? So we've got national surf reserves, and I've had a couple of photos sent through to me today, thanks to Mick Marlin, about Yelling Up, another place where old surfers like to congregate, and Jake's Point at Kalbarri, which is not a good place for old longboarders. Or anyone riding a longboard for that matter, really. But what's the difference between those, the national surf reserves, and then the World Surf Reserve?
Well, this is the way I see it, and the National Surfing Reserve's body may see it differently, but they were the people who got us into that in the first place. We were asked by National Surfing Reserves Australia to petition to become a National Surfing Reserve in 2013. And to be honest, up to that point, I really didn't know too much about it. And I had to really look very closely at why I should involve myself, because at that point, my connection was that I was the co-founder and the person running the Noosa Festival of Surfing. So why, as someone who's commercially vested, why should I strive to have Noosa become a national surfing reserve? And so I looked into it very closely, and ultimately found that it had many reasons that it was worthy, and largely to do with creating safe haven for surfers, protective measures against environmental issues that could damage the surf breaks, developmental issues that would maybe prohibit access or whatever. All those elements came into it, and I can see that it was, my fears initially that it was just some sort of hype that we maybe didn't need, went away, and we got fully behind it. And we spent 2 years working up our application to become a national surfing reserve. And the day that we were granted that status, I said to my committee, today is the day that we start working to become a world surfing reserve, because there were, I think at that time, there were about 25 national surfing reserves in Australia, and there were 8 world surfing reserves in the world, obviously. So I looked at what we had in Noosa. I thought, well, we belong in that bigger stage. It's nice to be here, but now we've got to go there. And let's regard this as a stepping stone. So we moved straight from one campaign into the next. And essentially it was the same criteria, the same idea behind it, that we want to preserve what we have now for future generations. And we want to ensure that no matter what happens, the surf breaks remain as they are. And we also address the issues that are changing them. And I started to talk about this a little while ago. Issues like overcrowding, access issues, parking issues. And some of these we can fix, behavioural issues. Some we can fix, some we can't, but we're going to try and fix them all. And of course, the parking issue is paramount in places like Noosa, where it's a dead-end street. There's no way out. You come and go via Noosa Drive. There's no way out. So we have to adopt a ski mentality or a snowboarding mentality, and assume that wherever you're going to surf, you have to park elsewhere and take a shuttle bus or whatever. That's unheard of in most parts of the world for surfing. It's normal in the world of snowboarding, skiing. Ultimately, in places like Noosa, where it's high density surfing, it's not high density living. It's high density surfing, particularly in a swell event. We have to rethink what we're prepared to do to get to the waves. And maybe one of those things is not take a car.
Yeah, and definitely whatever you do, don't take a 45-foot long camper van.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there are all kinds of permutations, of course. And these are not easy fixes, Wixie. And it's not just us. These problems exist all over the world, but we have to look for long-term answers and try and work out how to make surfing achievable and fun for the future.
That suggestion you just had with the shuttle bus, I mean, over by where the lakes are, you could build a massive car park and just have open shuttles, and you get your little wristband and jump on and off or whatever. That'd be magic. Problem solved. I don't reckon people have to drive to where I live. I can drive along the sand and park literally on the beach in front of where I surf. So when I go elsewhere, I don't mind having to go through a bit more effort than that. But Kira Molnar, you've been sitting there very quietly. Have you got some questions for Phil about how this affects your rights to go surfing and how it protects
Well,
you?
actually, a little question about the parking, because that's a really good one, because it is always crowded there. And I noticed they've changed the lines and all the parking and put yellow lines in. And at the start I was like, oh, damn, I can't find a park. But then if I did find a park, I always knew there was only necessarily going to be a certain number of people out there who could find the parks. So then I guess you've got to have that issue of overcrowding and that sort of thing, and how that affects as well if you've got more people obviously coming to that area, which is such a great place to enjoy. But is that one of the issues you guys have spoken about as well? Is it like obviously more people are coming here?
Yeah. By the way, guys, Kira next Tuesday will become newest member of our Noosa World Surfing Reserve committee, our stewardship committee. And I'm stoked to have her on board. She's a great advocate, not just for women's surfing, but for all for longboarding, but the whole surfing community of Noosa, and it's wonderful to have her on board. So yeah, to answer your question, yeah, of course, the crowds are the issue, but they're not the only issue. behavioural issues are another thing, and it's part of that is about the kind of surf craft being used in surf breaks, and we want to. We haven't talked about this yet, but there is Andy Mack and I separately have been working on a working committee for the Queensland state government for legislation they hope to get passed before the October elections. Don't know whether that's going to be achievable with all the COVID problems and everything, but that was their aim. It's legislation to protect at a higher level the two world surfing reserves in the state of Queensland, and part of that would be to restrict the use of surfing breaks by motorised personal motorised craft. What's the thing? Personal watercraft. Yeah, you guys know.
PWC. Yeah.
Yeah. PWC. Yeah, putting in place some restrictions that help overcome the problem that is immense on the Gold Coast, and just really starting to dig deep during swell events on the Sunshine Coast. That's one thing. That's a behavioural issue. But the deeper set behavioural issue is that people arrive at the beach pissed off because they couldn't get a car park. It's taken them an hour to get to the waves, and they get in the water and they're aggro from the start, and they create problems. And we have to make the whole process of surfing and the way you feel when you get there different. We have to.
Because you're going to be parked for a limited amount of time, you're going to squeeze all your surfing into there, so it's get out there and froth and steal every wave.
Well, yeah, I'm in a 2-hour zone, so therefore everybody else has to just part because I need to get 100 waves into, It's stuff like this, and it requires a whole new mindset. It's not going to come easy. I've been on it for years. Not just because I'm old now and I don't catch as many waves as I used to, but I don't stay out in the water as long as I used to. I like to go and get 6 or 8 waves, and I come in, and I'm well known for it. So when I'm out there in the water with people I know, they're counting. They're going, you'll be going in a minute. Thank God. Maybe that's the way to go. I don't know. Many problems and a lot of things that we're working on, but I think we will find solutions. And I'm particularly stoked that people like Kira, younger generation, are coming on board to help us work our way through these issues.
Oh, I'm glad that Kira's involved as well, because she's got so much spare time and nothing to do with it. So, what's
Totally.
That? Job 27 now, Kira. So what sort of teeth does the legislation have, and what can we as the longboarding community subset of surfing, what can we do to support there being more teeth? And by that I mean, someone's zooming around in a jet ski and noising up the place and being an idiot. How do we get to a point where the local powers that be are on board to stop that sort of behaviour?
Well, we don't know yet, and as I said, Andrew McKinnon and I, working on behalf of our two world surfing reserves that are the 2 Queensland world surfing reserves, which are the jurisdiction of the Queensland proposed legislation, have been working on different models in a working committee, which is due to meet in a few days. I'm not quite sure when yet, but it keeps changing because of the COVID things, taking ministers' minds off their jobs. But we're working with a very good minister, Nick DeBrini, is the Minister for Sport and a surfer, quite a good surfer. And we're working with a lot of good people in various departments towards a framework for legislation that is the best application of the available surrounding legislation regarding national parks, marine zones, etc., bathing reserves. Noosa, for example, is a bathing reserve, but the bathing reserve the bathing reserve means that you can't take a motorised craft in that area and so on. But it doesn't extend into the national park. It stops short of it finishes at Little Cove or Johnson's, and it goes straight out to sea. So it doesn't cover the 4 point breaks that are in the national park. So we want to see if we can change the limitations of the bathing reserve, just as a starter, so that we can stop motorised craft within that area.
So you're concerned specifically with the surfing aspect more so than the land or what's going on out to sea. But while you're working on the bathing beach thing, is there any way that around at Alexandria Bay you can put up like a big screen so that when you're out surfing you can't see the people bathing on the beach?
Depends who's there. Yeah.
Yeah, true. Kira's smiling.
I remember surfing a bay on my longboard, and I didn't have a leg rope at the time because there was no one else like really surfing there, and my board was, there was someone standing on the beach. I was just like, please don't pick up my board, please don't pick up my board. Swimming to it.
So Nate, have you been
Kira, they probably saw you swimming and they're like, oh no, I hope she doesn't come get that board. They're like, oh no.
But from what you've just said, Phil, the issues or the aims of what you guys are doing on for the Noosa Surf Reserve are very different to the Gold Coast Surf Reserve then, because we're not interested in preserving a national park as such. We do want to stop development. We've had a couple of times there where people have had proposals to turn Kura into a marina or a cruise ship terminal and things like that. And yeah, this is part of what we want to prevent, as opposed to...
Well, I guess it all comes down to the same thing, isn't it? Preserving what's there.
Definitely preserving what's there, but...
so you're not, the horse is bolted as far as preventing development on the Gold Coast. So.
Yeah.
But and keeping the amenity available as it is, that would make perfect sense.
Yeah, if I can just butt in there and answer Sean. Yeah, look, as I said earlier at the outset of this conversation about World Surfing Reserves, we each have our own issues, and they're very different. Gold Coast and Noosa essentially are about the same thing, which is the preservation of world quality waves for future generations. But the issues that you need to address to ensure that are quite different. Yeah. And therefore, I think our focus is more on access issues. And I mean, there are environmental issues, of course, that we have to keep a watch on, but they're not immediate threats. Whereas on the Gold Coast, there is a persistent, clear and present danger, you know, and his name's Tom Tate. You listening, Tom? Back off, buddy.
Hey, Phil, are you friends with Luke Sorensen on Facebook?
No, yeah, probably.
I love the way Luke and what Luke has to say about Tom. It's always interesting reading.
Yeah.
Nathan, you're sitting there a bit quiet now as well, mate. You've got the chance
to soak it all in, Weeksy. Just soaking it all in, mate. Soaking it all in. No, I actually wanted to ask you, Phil. I know I'm backtracking a little bit, but being an aspiring sort of journo, I was just interested.
Don't do it.
What, sorry?
Don't do it.
Don't do it. I just wanted to hear how you sort of got into that. How you went down that pathway from being a youngster.
I mean it. Don't do it. I mean, it's a dying trade. But my dad thought I would be a good diplomat, and he tried to get me into the diplomatic corps, and I failed the admission test. So I wanted to be a writer. I didn't know how I was going to be that, but I wanted to be a writer. And my dad wanted me to go this other path, and having failed to get into the diplomatic corps, we reached a compromise, which was that I would go for an interview with Qantas to become a marketing cadet, and I failed that too. And so at this point, he just put his hands in the air and went, "Okay, we'll do whatever you want to do because you're useless." And then I told him that I was going to go and work at the Sydney Daily Telegraph as a copy boy, and he jacked up again and said, you know, like, I was in a newspaper office once, and they were the dirtiest, filthiest, chain smoking, grog swilling, ugly people I've ever seen. And if you want to become one of them, I'm not very happy. So whatever Dad said I shouldn't do was like a green light for me.
Yeah.
I love my dad, but we just had a different worldview. So I went ahead and started as a copy boy, and then I was taken up as a cadet with the Sydney Morning Herald, and did my cadetship there while I half completed the university degree. There was no such thing as a journalism degree in those days, so I did an arts degree. Well, I didn't finish it because surfing grabbed me by the short and curlies. And I quit big time journalism and went surfing, and then gravitated into Tracks magazine. And so I never really had the academic background that most journalists have today, but and I kind of regret that. But I did have the incredible good luck to be associated with many fine journalists and fine politicians in the political sphere in which I worked quite a while, and in the environmental area, that gave me a rounded view. I wasn't just a journo who wanted to be a surf guy. I was a journo who'd done all this other stuff, and I brought that mindset to my surf journalism, and I think it's stayed with me. But to go back to your question, if you're really thinking about a career, just be careful, buddy, because every day there's fewer jobs. I mean, there must be another way you can turn your many talents to, I'm sure.
And people's time to even read something or absorb a piece is diminishing, and quality print and quality text is replaced with scrolling on Instagram, and I'm guilty of it. I love a good story, as I'm sure you do too, Phil, and everyone on the panel. But Nathan, go for it, because we're giving you the red light, and you'll do it anyway.
I love a good story, and Nathan, you keep going doing it, mate, because there's nothing like actually having the real.
Hey, wrong page you got to open up there, Weeksy. It's a
Yeah.
Get the one
that real thing in print. But Phil, if there was one thing you could look back on over your surfing career, in between being the grommet through the being the behind the scenes guy at the surf publications, the being the front guy at the events, and then now to being instigator and following through with the World Surf Reserve to project the future of the sport. Where's been your highlight through all that journey, mate?
I think the highlight of my entire surfing journey was the very beginning. And I wrote about this in my book, Life of Brine, which is available at all good bookstores.
I reckon I've got it here.
Yeah, you can't. You got nothing to hold up. No, I'm serious about this, because it's one thing I look back on and think, well, how lucky was I that this happened? And it was, I grew up on the Coal Coast, or what's now called the Coal Coast of New South Wales, the Illawarra coast, which is a very beautiful area. But at the time, it was dominated by the steelworks in Port Kembla. The smokestacks from steelworks were a horrendous thing on the skyline. But I lived north of there, and so that was only part of our vision. Our local beaches were pretty cool, and I had good places where I learned to surf. But at my home beach, I would run into this really handsome young guy who would come down from Cronulla during summer. He and his buddies would come down after work, go knock off. He was a chippy, and they were at his dad's firm, and they would knock off at about 3:30, 4 o'clock, and drive down. It was only 45 minutes to an hour to get down to our beach, and they'd come and surf until dark. And after school, I'd be down there, and I didn't have a surfboard, and this guy would loan me his board. And he was just of all the hotties that would come to our beach, and there were a lot of them. Kevin Parkinson, Dirtyface Brooks, all these South Coast legends and everything. But this one guy would come down from Cronulla, whose name is Bobby Brown, and he would actually loan me his board. And this incredible multicolored, beautiful Jackson and Cansdall surfboard. And he would loan it to me and watch me from the shore and just point me in the right direction, paddle, 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 all this stuff. And I caught my first wave standing up on that board. And but the coolest thing ever was that he showed me how to kneel paddle out into the lineup and then stand on your board to push yourself through the breaking wave, which I thought was the coolest thing ever. Anyway, that was 1962, 63. And in 1967, as Matty Chinosky, if nobody else will know, Bobby died. He was glassed at the age of 21. He was glassed in a pub brawl in Cronulla, his hometown, and that was the end of a great surfer. But he was the guy that came number 6 in the 1964 World Titles.
As a junior.
As a junior, I told you, no.
Yeah.
Anyway. To me, that was the best start that any surfer could have, because it was a guy who was not only a champion, but he was passionate about teaching a little kid how to ride a wave.
And I get maybe that helps to explain why you've kept up through the years supporting the juniors and the girls, and obviously with the Noosa Festival of Surfing, you've introduced tens of thousands of people to the various aspects of the sport. So thanks for what you've done, and more so thanks for what you're doing now to make sure that those that come after us will have the chance to experience your particular beautiful part of the world on the Sunshine Coast as in its pristine form for years to come. I think it's an amazing project and a very worthy way to spend some of your valuable time.
I thought you were going to say my golden years.
I was tempted. I was going to say rapidly reducing time, but I thought I'll...
Phil's surfing till he's 100.
Yeah, absolutely. And Weeksy, good to see you. And hopefully we'll get down to that left-hander in Bali pretty soon.
Yeah, and actually, yes, I might share that photo of you by the infinity pool. But it'd be great to see you back there soon, and obviously everything going back to normal all around the country and around the world. But Sean McEwen, it looks like you've got a couple of final words there. We'd better get off the air so everyone can get about their business.
Yeah, just before we wind up, just with the contest scenes that are starting to open up again, we've got the Queensland Old Mail Rally up on the sunny coast, 15th of August. That's being run by the Alex Mail Club. On the 29th of August, we've got the Rob West Dunga Day. Daffy Chisholm's running that. We've also, same day, we've got the Kira Longboard Classic. That's for entry-level competitors. Yeah, Wixie, you're coming over to it, and everyone's welcome. It's a good fun day, not to be taken too seriously. The other one we've got, 5th and 6th of December, we've got the Yale Mel in West Australia. There's probably a few other comps, so to all those that are out there listening, if you've got your interclub comps coming up, whether it's big local one or an international comp, not likely to be happening, but just let us know and we'll give it a shout out and let people know. Okay.
And who we got on next week, mate? The Surf Witches coming in this time?
We've got the Surf Witches are definitely on. We've got Mon and CJ and hopefully Robin Harvey. She's just had an operation on her shoulder. She'll be back. She's back home resting well. And we'll give her a call during the week and see if she's fit to come on board. So that'll be next week. I do have, my son is selling these. They are butterscotch beer. Okay. So he said I could have one if I gave it a plug.
There we go.
All right.
Butterscotch beer. Okay, good.
So,
can we get that?
A more in-depth story on Phil Jarratt's life, because we couldn't even begin to touch on some of his adventures here. But Life of Brine available at good bookstores. There's even a couple of videos you can watch, Nath, which will bring you up to speed pretty quick on how he ended up being the rat bag he is today. And but Phil, thanks again, and Kira, congratulations and commiserations joining the board. You got some work cut out for you. But
thanks. I'm super excited. See you Tuesday.
There we go. So on behalf of the surfing population, Phil, thanks for what you've done and continue to do. And World Surfing Reserves, get behind it. We'll put a link up down the bottom here on the YouTube version where you can find Phil's book and support his endeavours into the future. Keep him off the streets because I know doing it tough up there at Agnes Water at the moment. Say good day to the Agnes Water crew from us as well. Give the big fella at the surf hire a hug from me. Squally. And tell him we need him back on the West Coast as soon as conditions allow.
All right, buddy. Yeah, thank you for having me on, and to the panel. Great to talk to all you guys, and good luck with the future of this. I think it's a fantastic addition to Australian surf media. Keep it up.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Great to have you on.
Thanks, Phil. Good to hear it from the horse's mouth. So we're in Brady Bunch mode, so everyone's up on the screen. So wave to your mums, hold up signs, and do any appropriate gang signals. I'll leave you with a WA. You see you from the west side. Thanks for joining us next week, episode 10. Would love to have your company, Andy Mack. Love you, mate, from all of us on the panel and the viewers. Hang in there and give yourself a couple of days rest, mate. Maybe that's
hang in there, Andy. You'll be right, mate. All right, see you guys.
That's all for this week. See you next time on Longboarding.
I never talk